5 provinces are increasing the minimum wage today. Ontario, along with Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, and PEI, will also see wage hikes ranging from 20 cents to $1.30. In Ontario, the minimum wage is going up to $17.60 per hour. That's a 40-cent increase. This comes as many Canadians struggle with the high cost of living. And joining us today is Ian Lee to really break it all down for us. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning, Rosie.
Okay, so Ian, we're looking at a 40-cent per hour increase in minimum wage. Will that be enough for folks who are already struggling with the cost of living?
It's a absolutely fair question. I'm going to be a bit provocative because I'm evidence-based. I look at stats all the time. And I want to address and sort of dispel some of those urban legends out there. One urban legend is that people below the poverty line, which is a very serious problem, are people that are on minimum wage. It just seems obvious, if you're being paid a minimum wage, well, then you must be below the poverty line. In fact, something like 90% of people who are below the poverty line are not on minimum wage. That is to say, when you drill into and this came out of that huge study that was done several years ago by a prof at U of T for the Wynne government, but the stats are still out there. They've been updated. Most people on minimum wage are young people who are living at home in, middle-class families. It's 2/3 of all the people on minimum wage are 16 to 24 years of age. And so for those who argue that increasing minimum wage is going to address poverty, this has been dispelled empirically using econometric studies, and that is not the way to go. My concern with minimum wage, and I'm not against it, I worked on minimum wage when I started out, as did my children, as did a lot of my friends. But my concern is that we are pushing it up and we're causing harm to the small businesses who overwhelmingly employ minimum wage. Large corporations don't pay minimum wage. It's overwhelmingly small business like restaurants. And when you look, what's even more interesting, and I don't know anybody who's done this, you compare the US to Canada, they have much lower minimum wage for youth. And they have much lower rates of youth unemployment in percentage terms than we do. So there might be an issue there.
You bring up these provocative points here. Let's talk about, Ian, how this increase in minimum wage, up 40 cents per hour now in Ontario, how do you believe that will affect businesses? And of course, it looks like we're mainly talking about small businesses.
We are. Again, I want to repeat that because I think there's sort of people say, what's wrong with those greedy corporations? They can afford more. Big businesses like banks and pharmaceutical companies, they don't pay minimum wage. They just don't. It's small businesses, those little businesses down Bank Street, on strip malls, on Hunt Club Road, on Maryville Road, in Orleans, these little small mom and pop operations that might have 2 employees or 1 employee. Yes, I know some of the fast foods do. And they're much bigger and of course, and have a lot more resources. But you look at the restaurant industry where they're overwhelmingly family-owned restaurants, they are getting hammered. People are cutting back on going to restaurants and there's increasing failures in restaurants. So we have to be conscious. Yes, I understand the pressure to increase minimum wage, but we have to think of the cost that it's going to impose. It's going to harm small business who are the least well-resourced, the least amount of resources, and they have the highest rates of bankruptcy. And so we have to consider that before we sort of rush to judgment and just say, look, let's just jack up the minimum wage. There's no consequence to it. It's just all benefits. It's not all benefits. There's costs as well.
Okay, Ian, we don't have much time, but what would you do? You're a professor at Carleton Sprott School of Business. What would be your solution to those folks who are out there and looking for that raise in minimum wage? Yeah.
I would say this, and I understand there are older people that are on minimum wage, especially some seniors. I would have a 2-tier minimum wage that's much more pronounced than it is in Ontario. In the States, they have this in quite a few states where the minimum wage for someone from 16 to 19 is like a half of the minimum wage for everybody else. Why? Because we want those young people who have never worked before to get their foot in the door. That's the purpose, I think, of small business, of minimum wage, is we want to create a bridge for young people to get their foot in the door, to get that first experience. And when we make it too costly, businesses won't hire them. So we want to incent businesses to hire these young people that have basically no experience the first time. And one way we can do that is a two-tier minimum wage, maybe $10 an hour for a 16-year-old, whereas $18, $19 an hour for everybody else.
Ian Lee, it's always great to get your perspective, especially on this topic of the minimum wage going up to $17.60 per hour in Ontario. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks very much, Rosie. Thank you.